The Black Rose McQueen. I wanted to give a shout out to Ring IQ Boxing, and remember to tune in to the motherfucking relay.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, and now it's time for our weekend picks. First up, Firuza Sharapova is going to be taking on Happy Dowdy in her comeback fight, as was previously reported, but also flying low on the radar is the return to action of up-and-comer Tatiana Zrazevskaya, who fights out of the super bantamweight division. For those not already familiarized with this fighter, we talked about her earlier this year in January under our 2020 top prospects to watch. Sporting a professional record of 9 wins, 2 knockouts with no losses, born in Kazakhstan but currently residing in Mother Russia. She's going to be having her first fight since this whole COVID fiasco started, and this is a pedestrian-level opponent, make no mistake. This is a tune-up kind of opponent, keep busy kind of opponent, the same kind of opponent that Firuza Sharapova is going to be facing in Happy Dowdy. So as far as predictions go, weekend picks, I'm expecting both Firuza and Tatiana to make it through their next fight. But you want to keep your eyes on Tatiana Zrazevskaya, because this young fighter shows so much upside, so much promise, so much punch, and so much ferocity that by the time she's confronted with a world title shot, a world title opportunity against a world champion, doesn't matter which. Bet on Tatiana.
She's a killer.
And for a more extensive look at Tatiana, so you guys can see what I'm talking about, I will leave a link in the description box to my previous intro to this fighter uploaded earlier this year. I reiterate, this being a weekend picks video, as far as predictions go, I'm expecting both Firuza Sharapova and Tatiana Zrazevskaya to make it through their next fights going down tomorrow on the undercard of the cruiserweight matchup between Ruslan Pfeiffer and Alexei Pepin. Now, tomorrow night, from Top Rank via ESPN, we're going to be seeing a light heavyweight contest between very experienced, very game, Eleider Alvarez, former WBO champion Eleider Alvarez, against the always concussive, always dangerous, grinding, gutty, gritty Joe Smith Jr., riding high after giving Philadelphia's own Jesse Hart quite the shellacking. This contest and its outcome isn't going to be necessarily determined by experience alone, as both Joe Smith Jr. and Eleider Alvarez bring a wealth of experience to the table. You know, Joe Smith Jr., he upset the plans for Andrzej Fonfara. He upset the plans for what was supposed to be Bernard Hopkins' swan song.
Swapped punches with Sullivan Barrera.
Even managed to knock him down before losing a decision. Better still, that is an experience that Joe Smith Jr. has to draw from, and currently he's riding high after smacking around Jesse Hart in one-sided fashion. Unless we forget, Eleider Alvarez is plenty experienced himself, sporting wins over Sergey Kovalev, Jean Pascal, Lucien Bute, Isaac Chilemba, Isidro Prieto, and Edison Miranda. I mean, both of these guys bring experience to the table. Both of these guys are battle-tested, so experience alone isn't going to determine the outcome of this match. Boxing acumen is. I don't think that Eleider Alvarez is the same kind of puncher that Joe Smith Jr. is. Joe Smith Jr. packs enough punch that if this guy lands clean on anybody, that might be all she wrote. And I don't think that Eleider's necessarily as big a puncher as Joe, but he can get respect. He can punch. Michael Seals can tell you all about that.
Eleider can assert himself.
I mean, Joe Smith Jr. does pack enough punch to where if this guy lands clean, he could probably get most light heavyweights out of there rather abruptly. But getting through does hinge on the other guy's defense or the lack thereof. How well-rounded that fighter is. And I happen to think Eleider Alvarez is considerably more well-rounded than Joe Smith Jr. Enough that he can win this fight. Perhaps not by stopping Joe, but by outpointing him. You know, this ain't Jesse Hart. This ain't some newbie to the light heavyweight division that's going to spend most of the fight circling the ring, taking a tour of the turnbuckles as Joe Smith Jr. advances. If Joe Smith Jr. goes standing in front of Eleider Alvarez swinging for the fences, I think Eleider can make him miss and make him pay.
That's the difference.
Joe Smith Jr.'s chances of winning this fight, his chance, really, is his power. You know, this guy's a really strong puncher, and that's his best bet to win the fight. But I don't think he knocks out Eleider Alvarez. I don't. I think Eleider Alvarez is just as tough as Joe, because Eleider Alvarez has gone the distance with a sizable puncher already in Sergey Kovalev. A sizable puncher who's a more well-rounded boxer than Joe. And even though Eleider lost that fight, that was their second fight, their rematch. Even though Eleider lost that fight, he heard the final bell. He finished the fight on his feet. And I think he can do a little better than that here with Joe. I think that he can do enough to win a points decision. That doesn't mean there won't be thrills. That doesn't mean there won't be spills. That doesn't mean he's not going to have to work for it. I just happen to think that Eleider Alvarez has more ways of winning this fight than Joe does. So I'm going with Eleider Alvarez, and I'm going with Eleider Alvarez to win a points decision. Moving on to what in many ways feels like tomorrow's main event, even though it's going to be happening in the afternoon, evening hours here stateside, is the matchroom card. I'm going to start that card off with the fight between heavyweight contenders Alan Bobbik and Shondell Winters. Alan Bobbik, the undefeated up-and-comer with a professional record of 3-0, and Shondell Winters, who, quite honestly, for me, has seen too many Winters. You know, Shondell, he's about 39 years old, and he showed some ability in his previous outing against the former WBO heavyweight champion, Joseph Parker, but he was ultimately stopped in 5. Here, against Alan Bobbik, coming off of that stoppage loss, I'm anticipating another. Alan Bobbik, who seems to be a come-forward, aggressive kind of guy, looking to make a statement, throws everything with bad intentions. 10 years younger than Shondell. Shondell is 10 years Alan Bobbik's senior. I want to make this clear that for Alan Bobbik, who only has 3 professional fights, this is a considerable step up in competition from his last 3 outings. Those were pedestrian-level opponents, whereas Shondell does appear to have a bit more ability than those guys did. So I do imagine that in order to get the knockout, Alan is going to have to work for it. But I think he's going to get it, I do. I think that after 6 or 7 rounds in what is an 8-rounder, I think that Alan Bobbik is going to find his man, put him out. It was a very zesty exchange yesterday between the two heavyweight combatants. Very spicy. Makes for a titillating matchup.
That did get the fight some attention.
I saw a video clip of the exchange via Matchroom on Instagram. Commented on it. I like Bobbik to win the fight. He's got more upside. He's the younger guy. Shortly after that, I was notified of a direct message from some random stranger who wanted to put up $400 on Shondell Winters to win.
That was random as fuck.
Pardon me for saying so, but there really is a lot of ass betting on the internet, so I don't trust every random stranger that makes big claims about big cash he's willing to put down on a fight based on God knows what. Better still, I do have Alan Bobbik winning this thing because he seems like a physical guy, and those physically aggressive mauler types, those bruisers, those are the kind of guys that can give an old guy like Shondell Winters the longest of long nights. I'll say this about Shondell. For a man his age, 39 years old, he does show some ability. He does show some craftiness, some elusiveness in there. It's just that I don't trust that a 39-year-old man can keep someone as aggressive and come forward as Alan Bobbik off all night. Not for 8 rounds, quite honestly, not for 6. I have Alan Bobbik scoring a knockout or technical knockout inside of 7 rounds. 6 to 7 rounds. If you want to be a little bit more conservative, if you want to go the conservative route, Alan Bobbik is still likely to be the aggressor in this match, so it's conceivable that even if he doesn't knock Shondell out, he outworks him, throws more punches, wins the fight on points in the eyes of the judges. But I'm going to be a little gutsier, a little ballsier, and I'm going to say that Alan, given the exchange that these two guys had yesterday, Alan's going to go for the knockout, and he's going to get it. We then come to what is tomorrow's co-feature, co-main event, the long-anticipated rematch between the undisputed lightweight champion, Katie Taylor, and the challenger, Delphine Persoon. A fight that materialized only because Amanda Serrano didn't want any problems, I guess.
Just not.
Couldn't find her passport? Who really knows? In truth, I made up my mind about this fight a long time ago, and that's not a knock on anybody, but Katie Taylor has more ways of fighting a fight and winning a fight than Delphine does. Delphine only has one gear. When Delphine steps into the squared circle, you know what she's coming to do. You know how she's going to do it. Whereas with Katie, she's a bit more versatile, a bit more well-rounded, a bit more malleable. And I don't think that she will allow herself to be drawn out into a war the way she did the first time out. She made things harder on herself in doing so. Katie Taylor loves a good tear-up. You can see that. But I think she learned a lesson, and I think she's going to rely on something other than heavy artillery and hand speed. In this fight, I think what we're going to see is Katie Taylor's foot speed and her footwork, her elusiveness and her in-and-out game. I'm envisioning a Katie Taylor that's going to step into the pocket, do the business, then quickly get out of there. Step out, shorten up the punches, shorten up the combinations, keep it crisp, keep it precise, and keep it moving. As prolonged time in the pocket really does favor Delphine. Delphine, who we can say is the bigger puncher out of these two girls, and Delphine, who favors trading blows inside the pocket. You don't want to be there too long with her. That's what she wants.
What she needs.
See a lot of determination, a lot of conviction from the Taylor people ahead of this rematch. Katie knows what people were saying after that first fight. And in this second fight, in this rematch, she wants to make it decisive. She wants to make it dominant. She wants to make it crystal clear who the victor is. And the best way to do that is to use the one thing that Delphine ain't got. And that's the pedigree. Use the boxing. Delphine Persoon is a talented fighter, make no mistake. But she's a brawler, not a boxer. And Katie Taylor, having experienced Delphine Persoon's particular brand of aggression, now knows how to fully work around it. Head movement, upper body movement, staying off the center, getting under and around Delphine Persoon's wide punches, looking for countering opportunities and capitalizing on them. That's what I'm expecting to see. Instead of the heated exchanges that we saw the last time, I'm expecting a Katie Taylor that's working off the counter and focusing on precision work,
accuracy,
and clean punching, not the labored flurries and scrappy exchanges we saw the first time out. The sentiment here is that if Katie Taylor's going to win this fight, it's not going to be on the wings of hand speed, but foot speed. She's going to win this fight on her feet, on the balls of her feet. No sense in trying to match Delphine Persoon blow for blow. She's obviously a stronger puncher than you are, so you've got to work around that power. Katie Taylor's got the legs for the job. She just showed us that in the Cristina Linardo 2 fight. Cristina Linardo 2, who has her own brand of athleticism and explosiveness. So, my final diagnosis, my final assessment, my final prediction is that this is a fight that Katie Taylor is going to win, and she's going to win a more clear and apparent victory behind her boxing. Win a points decision. I like Taylor on points, and what I'm getting the feeling will be a boxing lesson for Delphine Persoon. And finally, what is tomorrow's main event of that same card, the heavyweight interim title fight between the interim champion, Dillian Whyte, and the challenger, Alexander Povetkin. And as I stated in a previous video, the outcome of this match really isn't a foregone conclusion. It's not a foregone conclusion that Dillian Whyte wins this thing. For me, it's a question of, can Dillian Whyte offset the aggression of an oncoming pressure fighter? And we have seen him do this in the past with another pressure fighter, though not all pressure fighters are created equal. The pressure guy I'm talking about is Derek Chisora. You know, in the first fight, Dillian Whyte had a couple of tear-ups with that guy. In the second fight, he took a more methodical, cautious approach. As the advancing Derek Chisora let the fists fly, Dillian was able to finish that guy with a left hook straight from the devil's ass. Now, Alexander Povetkin, like Derek, is a pressure fighter, but I reiterate, not all pressure fighters are created equal. What Alexander Povetkin looks to do when applying pressure is to hit you with something that you don't see, whereas with Derek, it's a more sustained attack that you can brace yourself for. Povetkin wants to rob you of the chance of seeing the punches coming. That's what's made him so dangerous over the years. The question is, does Dillian Whyte have what it takes to deal with this? And I dare say yes. Though I don't say yes with 100% confidence, I will say that Dillian can deal. And I say that Dillian can deal because he's been in a situation where he had to offset the aggression from an oncoming opponent in Derek Chisora 2 times, and in Oscar Rivas as well. That's another guy who had to get mid-range to inside on Dillian before he could do anything. Alexander Povetkin finds himself in a similar position. It's just Alexander's methodology of getting there, getting mid-range to inside, differs from most. Alexander's calling card is to move side to side whilst closing the gap, getting under and around the other guy's lead hand to come over with a big left hook. Big left hook that the guy doesn't see, big left hook that the guy's not ready for.
That's what he does.
But here, in the twilight of his career, as he is approaching the end, those side-to-side movements, they're not as sharp as they used to be in Alexander's punch. It doesn't get the same respect that it used to. We saw that in the Michael Hunter fight.
Alexander's not as explosive as he used to be.
And what Dillian is tasked with is surviving the early onslaught, dragging the fight out, dragging the old man into deep waters where he may not be able to swim. I'll tell you what I think. I think that all that talk of maximum violence is little more than bravado, because I envision a Dillian Whyte that is going to use that lead hand to his best ability to keep Alexander out. He's not going to be looking to engage him early on in the fight while the guy's still fresh.
Looking for the knockout.
These guys, they know their man. They know who they're in there with, and they know what he's looking to do, how he's looking to finish this fight. They know that. And they know that the longer this fight wears on, the harder a toll it takes on a guy, Alexander Povetkin's age, who's been through as much as he's been through as a professional and an amateur.
He's only ever lost to top-level fighters as a pro.
But here today, that is what Dillian Whyte is. I envision Povetkin giving it a spirited effort. One last hoorah, one last go, before he calls it a career. But ultimately, I'm going with Dillian Whyte to fight cautiously early and start laying into Alexander late. I think Dillian Whyte is going to stop Alexander Povetkin. Dillian Whyte has arrived quite trim, fighting fit, in much better condition than we saw that Marius Vach fight. Though, Dillian's defense, that was a short-notice fight. He's been training in Portugal non-stop for months, and his current condition, at least to me, suggests that he plans on going into deep waters, that he plans on potentially going the distance. He's here for the long haul, where Alexander will be most vulnerable. That doesn't make it an easy task, but I do believe that that is the game plan. There may be some thrills, there may be some spills. Dillian Whyte is no stranger to kissing the canvas, and he might in this fight. But in spite of that, given what's on the line and how hard he has worked to get to this point, I don't think he's going to let it slip away to an Alexander Povetkin who here today is in the twilight of his career. I'm going with Dillian Whyte to win this thing by way of knockout or technical knockout late.